Bienvenue and welcome to beautiful Limousin, France. I'm the theoliverpickard and this is Jolene, and today we're going to be delving into the scary, dark depths of Dynamo's voltage regulators and charging issues with your classic car. Now I'm going to use Jolene here as an example, but the basics of what I'm showing you in this video don't change from mark to mark, so whether it's an MG, a Tatra, a Beetle or anything, it doesn't really matter. As long as it has a dynamo and a voltage regulator, these are the basics. You are going to need your owner's manual though, because your owner's manual will tell you the specific voltages and amps of certain things that I'm going to be showing you, and a wiring diagram never hurts. When the subject of voltage regulators and dynamos come up, a lot of people get very scared and very worried, and they don't understand what's going on, and they start throwing money at the car. And throwing money at a situation very rarely solves it. So in this video we're going to systematically go through everything. Tools you'll need for this video are assorted spanners, screwdrivers, a socket set, that kind of thing. But specifically you are going to need a good multimeter. A good multimeter doesn't have to be expensive, but a digital one is better. This multimeter I've had for about 10 years, and I think I bought it from a supermarket like Aldi or something like that. I'm not a professional mechanic, I'm not working on cars all day, every day, and I'm not using it all day, every day. I think it's had the same battery in since I bought it. But a good multimeter doesn't have to be expensive. Expensive multimeters have more functions, but for this video, you're not going to need any of those. So a simple, good multimeter will serve you well. Another tool that you're going to need, if we're going to be replacing wiring, a cheap crimping tool is not an option. Invest in a really good quality crimping tool. They aren't a lot of money, but they ensure that the electrical connections that you make and the electrical connections that you add are reliable and strong. There are two types of trouble you may get in with charging. The first one is when your dynamo light comes on and won't go out. And the second is where you come out to your car in the morning and your battery is absolutely and completely dead in one night. We'll talk about that a little later on in this video. For now, for both of those things, you need to make sure your battery is in good condition. So you need to take your battery off and you need to charge it up overnight. If you have an electrolyte battery, you need to check your electrolyte, because obviously if your battery's in bad condition and it's not holding charge because your electrolyte's wrong, then you need to sort that out and sort your electrolyte mix out in your battery. But if you've got a sealed battery, simply whip it off and put it on charge overnight. Before we put it on charge, we're going to check the voltage in our battery. So we get our voltage regulator and we're going to turn it on DC volts, DC being direct current. And we're going to check how many volts we've got in our battery. So I'm going to put positive to positive, negative to negative, and our battery charger reads 6.18 volts, which Jolene hasn't been running a lot lately, in the last few days anyway, and I've been working on the electrical system. So she's down a little bit, but she's absolutely fine. Obviously, if you've got charging trouble, you'll read a lot less. Make a note of it, and then put your battery on charge overnight and check it again in the morning after the battery has been charging all night, and hopefully your battery will be fully charged. If not, you may need a new battery. There may be other things causing the dead battery, but you need a battery that's working in order to do any of these tests, because we need to start from a point that we know is fine and working. So we know that our battery is fine. If our battery needs replacing, we've replaced it, and now we have a good starting point. Your charging problem may have just been that your battery's out, but if it's a dynamo issue and your dynamo light's coming on, that's not the case, and your knackered battery is a symptom of a bigger problem. Equally, if you came out in the morning and your battery is just dead, that's a symptom of a bigger problem. So I'm not going to reconnect my battery just yet. I'm going to check that obviously my battery terminals aren't worn out. Over time, battery terminals stretch and wear out and break down. These battery terminals are perfect and fit each terminal perfectly. I'm also going to check that my battery cables are in good condition. I've recently replaced this battery cable because it was literally crunchy when I took it off. It was stiff, and when I moved it, it crunched, which means basically that inside the battery cable it was completely corroded and utterly worthless. And I'm going to check all my connections running from my dynamo all the way to my voltage regulator, and I'm just going to check nothing's damaged. There are no broken or pulled apart wire connectors. Everything is the way it should be. And if you have a fuse box, check your fuse box and check you haven't blown a fuse. It could be as simple as that. However, Citroen has no fuses. Citroen also doesn't have a fan belt, but if your dynamo is connected to your engine by a fan belt, check the fan belt. 99 times out of 100, when your dynamo light won't go off while you're driving, it's simply because your fan belt's slipping, even if it's not squealing. If the car is new to you, if you've just purchased it, make sure the fan belt is the right size, because even if you run out of adjustment on your fan belt, if the fan belt's too big, the fan belt won't be tight and might be slipping just so. So it's simply the case of replacing your fan belt. If your fan belt's cracked or damaged, replace it. And make sure you clean all your pulleys and there's no residue or oil on the pulleys or anything like that that may cause slippage. Nothing's obviously wrong, there's no smell of burning, obviously. Which may be a clue to something else. Check that we have no burnt wires, check we have no shorted wires. On modern cars there's a lot of plastic, and a wire connector that's slightly pulled apart like this doesn't pose much of a threat. However, on a classic like Citroen, everything's metal, so when anything touches that, it could cause a short. So we want to check that everything is the way it should be, and we have no wires and we have nothing broken and everything looks correct. Then we can start testing things. So once we've tested all of that and everything, we know all the connections are all fine and your fan belt's working and all that jazz, and you're still not charging and your dynamo light is still on, that's an issue. So now we're going to reconnect our battery. One of the main differences between an alternator and a dynamo is that a dynamo has no polarity, and over time, and for many different reasons, a dynamo can actually lose its polarity. So one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to polarize the dynamo. This is simply done with a piece of wire. Now you have to be careful, obviously, because you're dealing with electrics. You don't want to touch things with your bare hands, so you want to give yourself a bit of space, especially on a 6-volt car, especially on a car that has no fuse box, because there is literally nothing saving you from all the power in that battery. But we're not going to do it at the dynamo because the dynamo's in the front of the engine in Citroen, and that means removing the fan, and it's a pain in the backside. First, we're going to do it the easiest way, which is to polarize it at the voltage regulator. If you polarize the dynamo from the voltage regulator but it doesn't polarize, this is because there's a problem with the wiring between the voltage regulator and the dynamo, which we'll check in a little while. But if the wiring is all complete and if the wiring is in good condition, you can polarize the dynamo perfectly from here. You simply place your piece of wire against the battery terminal and the field terminal, which on this Sieb unit is EXO, and you touch, touch, touch. You should get a little tiny spark and your dynamo is now polarized. Simple as that. And believe it or not, that may fix the entire problem. So start your engine, connect your voltage regulator, DC 20, and see if she charges, see if your dynamo light goes out. So we've checked all our connections, we've checked our fan belt, we've checked absolutely everything, and we've polarized our dynamo, and that little light just hasn't gone out, and we still aren't charging. So we need to find out whether our problem is at the dynamo end or the voltage regulator end. And there's a simple way to do that, yet again with our little wire. For this test, it helps if you have someone else or you have crocodile clips on your multimeter, because you need someone to measure the voltage at the battery terminals. And what you're going to do is you're going to start the car, they're going to measure the voltage with the multimeter on DC 20, You're going to take your piece of wire yet again, and on this voltage regulator, you're going to place it between EXO, which is the field terminal, and the dynamo. And what that does is it cuts out the voltage regulator completely from our circuit. If the volts climb, then there is no problem with the dynamo, and your problem is with the voltage regulator. If the volts don't climb, then your voltage regulator is probably fine, and it's your dynamo. It's at this stage that I'll mention I recently had a little charging problem, and it's one of the reasons why I'm making this video, because I saw a lot of people panic and talk about replacing everything, and you don't need to do that. But I had recently replaced my starter motor. I got this starter motor from a place called defranzone.de in Germany, which is a German specialist in classic Peugeot, Renault and Citroen bits. And they do rebuilt Paris-Rhône starter motors, which I had a Dociler unit, and I had to swap my starter cable and my choke cable around to fit this one, but they are interchangeable, so it doesn't really matter. But if you have a problem with your starter motor and then you have a problem with your ignition or charging, chances are you've got a bad earth somewhere. So I went through the entire car and I found that I had no earth strap between the engine and the chassis. My engine was completely unearthed. The last owner who wired this car had not fitted an engine earth strap. So I made one up and I fitted it. And I've also gone through the rest of the wiring now and replaced a bunch of bad connections and stuff like that. Just so that this doesn't happen again, because you don't want to be replacing stuff all the time. My problem was at my voltage regulator. But voltage regulator, 6-volt voltage regulators like this are about €250. Starter motors are expensive, obviously, and the reason it all broke was because the engine was earthing through the voltage regulator and not through the engine earthing strap as it should have been. So for the sake of a 50-cent piece of wire and a couple of electrical connectors, basically it cost me €200 in a new starter motor. But my voltage regulator was okay and I was able to sort it out, which I'll show you later on in this video. But for now, let's say that we've closed the connection between the field terminal and the dynamo, and our voltage does not climb. Our problem is with our dynamo, and on a 2CV, it's here. It lives behind this fan housing. So we're going to have to remove the fan, and we're going to have to remove this grill, which is for the crank start, and we're going to have a look at our dynamo. So to remove this grill, you just need a 12mm socket. This is a little ratchet I keep in the car. Luckily, most things on these early 2CVs are actually 12mm. And of course, like we do with all our jobs on this channel, we're going to keep our nuts and bolts in a little box, safe, so that afterwards we can find them. To remove the fan, you simply need a 13mm socket, a small extension, and of course a ratchet. And we're going to put it on, click it onto the right side, right, and you're going to need a swift blow like that, and it should come off. Like that. Simple. And we're going to remove this bolt. Oh, not yet. Some people on some forums make this seem like a really big job, and it's just not. Right, then we've removed our bolt. Now we get our extension with our socket on it, put it in the end of the fan, and just give it a wiggle, and then that will pop off. This is our dynamo, and as you can see here and here, we have little charbons. These, or carbons, these are our brushes. And they are little tiny graphite connectors, and we want to make sure that there's plenty of life left in them because they are replaceable, and that their little wires are connected and in good condition. We also want to make sure that our wires here and here are also in good condition, and that our main contact, which is this wheel, which is connected to the field windings, which are deeper in the dynamo, is also clean and in good condition. If it's a bit grubby and black, you can clean it up with some really fine grade sandpaper. I don't suggest using anything more than 1000s grit sandpaper, and I don't suggest being rough at all. If this is all in good condition and everything looks fine, we need to check our continuity, because we need to know that our connection between here and there is working. So everything's in good condition, and we need to check that our connection between here and our voltage regulator is sound, because obviously if the dynamo is spinning and making power but it's not getting to the voltage regulator because of faulty wiring, we need to know. On our multimeter there's a little symbol at the bottom here which looks like sound waves, an arrow and a line, and we're going to turn our multimeter, I keep saying voltage regulator, we're going to turn our multimeter here. At this point it freaks out because it's got low battery, but it's fine. Right. So now it doesn't matter with which electrode, because we're only checking continuity, and we're going to check between the field terminal here and the field terminal here. So we're basically checking just the wire that runs all the way around here and check that's in good condition. And if it is in good condition, we hear a beep. And then we're going to check between the top dynamo wire and the dynamo, and we're going to hear a beep. That tells us that our wiring between here and here is in perfect condition. If you don't hear a beep, your problem may be your wiring, and you need to go through the wiring between there and there and find out your problem. But fortunately, because you've checked your continuity, you know whether it's your field wire or it's your dynamo wire. The other thing we can do is we can check the continuity within our dynamo itself, because if the dynamo itself, if the field windings have shorted because of something that I'm going to talk about in a minute, then if the dynamo's burnt out inside, it won't have continuity. So if we connect here and here and we hear a beep, we know that we're okay. So I know my dynamo is working. Dynamos are really stout, not like alternators. Dynamos are really, really tough, and you can get a dynamo out of a scrapyard that looks like complete crap, and it will run and it will generate power and it will function. It's very unlikely to be your dynamo, but now we know for sure, and the dynamo is the most expensive bit. A rebuilt dynamo for my car is about 450 euros, and I can sleep soundly knowing that my dynamo is not to blame for my charging issue. If you find out that you have bad continuity in the wiring between the voltage regulator and your dynamo, once you've replaced those wires, it's a really good idea to repolarize your dynamo in the manner that I showed you earlier. So now we know we have good continuity, we know our charbons, our brushes are in good condition, and we know we have continuity through our dynamo, so we know our dynamo isn't blown, or is most likely not blown. So the most likely culprit to all of this is our voltage regulator. So with our multimeter, turn to continuity, which again is the little arrow and the sound wave. We can check the continuity of our earth, because everything needs positive, negative and earth. One electrode to earth, and of course one to the chassis rail, because that's where earth goes. And we get a beep. Now then, voltage regulators look pretty scary. It's this black box of doom. However, the cover is removed with two simple crosshead screws. This is the inside of your voltage regulator. These are basically switches. Each one contains a magnet, and when the electricity rises, the magnet turns on and it sucks the little switch into contact. It's as simple as that. Now then, when we talk about voltage and amps, this little guy is volts and this little guy is amps. So if you think about it in the context of plumbing, this little guy is the size of the pipe, and this little guy is the pressure, volts, amps. And as you're driving down the road, the voltage rises as the engine speed rises and the dynamo speed rises and the amount of power it produces rises. As soon as it's too much for what the engine needs, the contact opens. And that opening of the contact allows the excess power to run to the battery. As you drive along, these two chatter up and down. This guy here is the battery cutoff solenoid, and obviously he disconnects the battery. He should be open, so he should be making no contact while the car is off. The reason for this is while you're driving around, you obviously want your battery connected to your car. That way it works. But when you get home, you don't, because if this guy is closed when the car is not running, all electricity wants to run to earth. So the electricity from your battery will want to run back through him and back into your dynamo, which will wreak havoc with your engine, because all the wiring that's between here and your dynamo isn't designed to take the amount of power that's in your battery. Damage can be done in seconds. Wires can melt, the internal windings for your dynamo can melt, it can destroy your battery. Many bad things can happen, including fire. So it's imperative that this guy, while your engine is turned off, is not making contact. If you've come out to your car in the morning and your battery is completely empty, there's a smell of burning, and you're wondering why, it could be that your battery solenoid has stuck shut. These go up, this one goes down. Some French ones come up, some British ones go down, and this being a CB unit does both because it's French and it can. There are tiny contacts under here, and those contacts can get furred up with time. Or, like was my case a couple of weeks ago, because I had no earth and my entire engine was earthing through this earth wire here into the car, my contacts had gone black. And you can get some really fine 1000 grit sandpaper and clean the contacts. Once you've cleaned up the little points, hopefully your charging problems may be over. And it may have simply been a case of the little contacts being dirty. But if you take note while the engine is running, these two should flutter up and down, and your battery cutoff solenoid should remain closed. If your battery cutoff solenoid doesn't remain closed and it flutters, it needs adjusting. Now, this can be done by an electrical engineer, or it can be done by yourself to the correct specifications given to you in the workshop handbook. But basically it needs adjusting so that it doesn't flutter, but so that when you turn off the engine, the points open. So when it's off, it's open, and when you're driving, it's closed. That's it. It shouldn't flutter, it shouldn't move, it shouldn't nothing. These two should flutter. So if while your engine's running, this one is down and these two are fluttering but not fluttering enough, or not fluttering at all, then using a multimeter they can be adjusted until they are the correct specification given to you in your workshop handbook. Voltage regulator can be adjusted by the tiny little screws in the back. Some voltage regulators actually have a cam and clicks, but it basically works in the exact same way. If after all this, your voltage regulator still isn't working and your car still isn't charging, I'll be amazed. But if that's the case, then you need to see a specialist. But when you do see the specialist, you'll have a lot of information for them that they can then use to easily, quickly, and hopefully cheaply solve all your problems. But I've read many threads and I've seen many things about people who've had voltage regulator problems and they've gone straight out and they've bought a brand new voltage regulator when it may have simply needed adjusting, because after 55 years and nearly 56 years of fluttering up and down, these contacts can get a little bit worn. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope I'm leaving you all with a fully functional automobile. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them down below. Thank you all for stopping by. Please be awesome to each other, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye.